Said the rockstar move with them rockstar dudes. Said the rockstar move with them rockstar dudes.
Now here's an SUV I'm sure even your grandmother needs no introduction to at this point. It's the Mahindra Thar Roxx, the 5-door Thar. And even though they gave it a rather silly name, there is no overstating just how significant an SUV this is for Mahindra. I mean, they launched it on Independence Day with a 150 SUV convoy led by none other than John Abraham himself. And they even got Farhan Akhtar to play a rock concert for the Thar Roxx. But amidst all this bravado and fanfare, one thing stuck out to me. The head of the auto division, Vijay Nakra, did say that their tagline, the SUV, is not just a bit of marketing. They really, really mean it, because this car, when it comes to space, ride comfort, interior comfort and refinement, is on par with none other than the XUV 700. Now, that's a very bold statement to make. It means that this is not good just by Thar standards, it's good by all SUV standards. And today, we're going to take an extensive drive of this SUV and see what they're really on about. Now, there is a whole lot to take in with this SUV, and I'm going to go into as much detail as I can with the time that we have. But you tell us down in the comments what you think of it, whether you like it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and I hope you're subscribed to Autocar India. And before we go any further, just a bit of a disclaimer. Whatever we think of the car, I have to say this has been one of the most chaotic drive events in my 10 years of reviewing cars. So if you see a few inconsistencies, number plates changing, colors, interiors, backgrounds, I do apologize. It has been crazy, but we want to get this review out as best as we can for you.
Now, you might think there's not a lot to talk about design-wise, but they've actually made a number of changes. Chief of these is the new 6-slot grille, which is split down the middle and looks like a set of gritted teeth. I personally would have liked it in a contrast color rather than the body color treatment, but tell us what you think down in the comments. The rest of the face is pretty similar, save for the new LED projector headlamps and their C-shaped DRLs.
Now the big change, of course, is round here on the side. Up front, things are quite familiar with similar wheel arches, indicators inside them, but there you'll find big new 19-inch alloy wheels. Down here the badge now says Thar Roxx, and in the big mirrors you'll also find the new cameras on the sides. Here is quite a sturdy side step, and as before you get the exterior hinge doors for all 4 of them. Now onto the door that matters most. It's the new rear doors of this car, and well, the actual aperture down here is quite narrow from the outside at least, and it eats into the wheel arch quite a bit. I wonder how that will factor in when you're getting in and out of the car. We'll know in a moment. Around here you'll find that the door handle is concealed inside the door itself. And here, this sort of triangular section for the quarter glass and this pillar, it's caused quite an uproar on the internet, but tell us what you think down in the comments. The roof is contrast colored, all black or rather dark grey. And over there you'll find a big sunroof. This car does not come as a convertible like the 3-door does. Now at first glance, the rear end of the Thar Roxx might look quite similar to the 3-door Thar, but look a little bit closer and you'll start to notice some differences. Like the part LED tail lamps with the LED C-shaped signature over there, or this new 19-inch alloy wheel like the rest of the car that's on the back here, and the rear view camera that's nestled in there. It's even got a similar split tailgate to the 3-door Thar, but that all changes once you open the door and see what's inside. Now, this may be a 5-door Thar, but it's still a 5-seater. There's no third row, and that means you get a pretty cavernous boot. 644 liters, Mahindra tells us, from the floor to the ceiling. Now that's substantial. That's luxury SUV territory. And yeah, our 2 trolley bags have no problem fitting in there. There are also some interesting details if you come in a little bit closer, like the fact that even though there are no 3rd row seats, there's still a handle on the inside if you want to open this from the inside. Also, you'll find over there the subwoofer for the Harman Kardon sound system, and everything here is nicely carpeted down and can hold a whole lot. And if you want to store even more, those seats split fold 60-40. And speaking of which, let's go see what it's like sitting in those back seats. Now, I'm just under 5'8", and the seat, as you can see, comes to about my waist when I'm standing outside the car. And as you can see, this wheel arch does intrude quite a bit, I was right, into the entryway to this back seat. So there's a good thing there's a grab handle here and a step, because you do have to climb up over the wheel arch, sit down and shut the door. But you're greeted to quite a spacious interior when you're here. I mean, knee room is just really amazing. That's set to my driving position, and I don't think even taller passengers would have a problem with that. Where they might have a slight concern is headroom, because while I'm okay, I think 6-footers might be quite close to this roof lining thanks to the sunroof. Now, thigh support is excellent, as is often the case with Mahindra's SUVs, but the cushioning on the whole is a little bit firm. I wish it was just a touch softer. Now, if you flip this down, it's a little flimsy, but you do get a pair of rather shallow cup holders. The windows are quite upright and this aperture is quite small, but that's okay, because with this quarter glass you get in quite a lot of light. The window switches are up here on the doors. You get rear AC vents and a Type-C port for charging, and a little place to keep your cell phone down here. The panoramic sunroof, it truly is massive. Mahindra says it is one of the largest around, and it really comes all the way back past the rear passenger's head, so letting in a load of light. In fact, I thought it would be a little bit wider, but that's okay, because really it lets in so much light and gives a great feeling of airiness.
More than just the size though, it's how big the opening is that's truly impressive here.
Of note is that the roof liner feels really high quality, and I also like that 2 of the 9 Harman Kardon speakers are back there above the boot. But the piece de resistance with this seat, it's got quite a bit of recline, so if you just want to crash out on a long drive back here, you'll be pretty comfy.
The back seat and boot then represent a huge jump in practicality compared to the 3-door Thar, but that doesn't mean they haven't lavished a great deal of effort on the front of the cabin.
Now, of course, there are some similarities between the interior of this car and the 3-door Thar. I mean, the basic general layout is the same. You still get grab handles here and here, although these ones are white this time, which is going to attract some stains. And you get the same bolt upright SUV-like seating position, but there's where the changes start. Also white and cream is the general upholstery of the car. It's two-tone on the dash and the seats are off-white. That's an interesting choice for a 4x4 SUV. Mahindra says you can wipe it down, but why should you have to when it could have just been a darker color? There are also a few trim changes. I like that the steering wheel comes from the Scorpio N and the XUV 700. There are these new screens. This 10.25-inch screen up here and another 10.25-inch digital dial set, both of which I think come from the 3XO or the XUV 400. Down here you'll find some cup holders that are quite shallow. I mean, they can't take a very wide cup, and if you put it in here it's going to slip over, and similarly small cup holders in the doors. Here there would have been a gear lever for the 4x4 system to select low range, but this is a rear wheel drive car, so you get a nice deep cubby hole instead. Here is the automatic gear lever. Down here you'll find the wireless charger, and here you get automatic climate control knobs and some very interesting switches, including drive modes and ventilated seats. That's right, these front seats are ventilated, and the driver's seat is also powered. There's no height adjust, but I don't think you need it when the seating position is so high anyway.
The seats are large enough, but the cushioning is firm in places and there's an excess of shoulder support which makes you sit in a hunched position.
Now there's also a whole lot more equipment in this car compared to the 3-door Thar, and let me take you through it right now.
Some of the highlights for me are those twin 10.25-inch screens, the 360-degree cameras, the electronic parking brake, powered driver's seat, ventilated front seats, panoramic sunroof, and the incredibly punchy 9-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. It all serves to move the Thar firmly out of recreational off-roader and into premium SUV territory. You also get 6 airbags, ISOFIX mounts, 3-point seat belts all round as standard, while the top spec cars get level 2 ADAS features. There is, however, no Bharat NCAP score for the Thar Roxx just yet. But hold on, because I'm not quite done with this interior.
There are other interesting things in this interior, like here you will find the controls for the big panoramic sunroof, which in my opinion could have started a little bit further ahead. Yes, it's very large, but it's more for the rear passengers than it is for the two in the front. I also like this frameless mirror, which looks very premium, as to the felt linings around the buckles for the seat belts. It's something you can't see, but it just adds that premium touch. Now under here, this is a split thing where the left hand side armrest slides, and if you lift it up, you'll find a pretty small cubby hole down there. Now there are some oddities that I'm not so happy about. It's just nitpicks really, but it's interesting. Like these AC vents. Now with the knob in the center, you think this is the center position, but actually the vents are pointing to the right. To get them to point center, you have to push them all the way there. It's just bugging my OCD a little bit. And while quality in general is pretty decent, there are a few build quality oddities, especially with finer things like the stitching, which is a little bit rough and can be a bit wavy in places. Now, I really like this touchscreen. The UI is very, very attractive and very premium looking in my opinion, and really uplifts the ambience and the luxury quotient of this cabin. It works quite slickly, and it's got some interesting features. It's got navigation by Map My India, Mapples. It's got adventure stats, which is an upgraded version of what you got in the Thar 3-door. This is your on-road stuff with power, torque, and your trip meter. Here you get a rev counter and your speed. Here you get a compass. Then you move to the off-road stuff, which gives you roll, pitch, more trip information, tire direction, compass again, and altimeter, and lap info for track use in a Thar. Okay, fair enough. But again, it's one of those oddities that seems to have come from other cars in Mahindra's portfolio onto this. For instance, there is also a climate menu that is set up for dual zone, as you can see, with two temperatures, but this car of course only has single zone. When you change the temperature, it changes for both sides, so it is actually still single zone, but it's been set up for dual zone. And there are some oddities like that throughout the user experience, both here and on this screen, that aren't very friendly and just a little bit at odds with the ambition of the UI. So that's something I hope they can sort out in software later on.
And as I said, this extends to the digital dials too.
The digital instrument cluster again is very, very pretty looking, but it is quite slow to function. You have to keep pressing this one button to cycle through all the menus, and they take their time to cycle through. And the most annoying thing is that if you get interrupted by a passing car and the parking sensors go off, it resets and you have to start the whole process all over again. Still, there is a little bit of customization in the 3-dial designs that you can choose from, and yes, it is very clear and easy to read, so I'll give it that.
Now onto the all-important task of driving the Thar Roxx, and it comes in various powertrain configurations. There's petrol and diesel 4x2 in manual and automatic guises, and diesel 4x4 in manual and automatic guises too, with no petrol 4x4 for now at least. And of all these, we managed to drive 3 of them. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't get much shooting time, so if the outside of the car doesn't match the inside, please understand. Let's start with the petrol automatic, and since we are on our long convoy drive through the city, our first impressions started in traffic.
So this is the point of time in the drive when we are actually stuck in quite a bit of traffic. So I thought, since we're all slowed down, might as well tell you a little bit about this car's ADAS system, because yes, it has level 2 ADAS. I like the way they've calibrated it. It's not overly sensitive, which can be a problem in some cars. Here it gives you enough leeway and a few warnings before it actually intervenes, especially the auto emergency braking. It'll vibrate the steering wheel, and presumably once you get really close to the obstacle in front of you, it will slam the brakes. Thankfully, I haven't had a chance to fully test out the extent of that feature just yet. If you can hear those beeps, that's because the parking sensors around the car while it's in drive are quite sensitive, and the moment anything comes quite close to this very big car, it sets off the parking sensor. There is a way to turn that off, because yes, that is quite sensitive and it tends to fire quite often.
The good news is other ADAS features that matter when you're going faster, like adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist, work well too, as we found out later on. But for now, how does this car drive?
Now this particular Thar I'm driving is the Petrol automatic rear wheel drive, and that I think makes it the most lifestyle-y or conventional of all of the Thar models on sale. It's also potentially the lightest of all the Thars, which I think also makes it the sportiest, if that's even a thing with Thars. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Because this car does have a zoom drive mode, which I believe is the sportiest one. And yep, instantly throttle responses get very sharp. In fact, they can be a little bit too sharp and quite snappy if you're not being careful. But if you can get past the snappiness, what will really strike you about this engine is just how smooth and how strong it is. 177 horsepower, 380 Nm, that's a seriously strong amount. And all funneled to the rear wheels in a very snappy manner in this zoom mode. Yeah, you will spin the wheels on a loose surface. But let's dial it back down to zip drive mode, which is comfort, oddly enough. And let's appreciate how smooth this 6-speed Aisin torque converter automatic gearbox is. You can hardly tell it's there, you can hardly tell it's shifting, and you're just coasting along on a nice cushy ball of torque. Doesn't feel rev happy or urgent, and the gearbox just masks everything so well that the experience is just so relaxing and unobtrusive. The downside? Well, you're probably going to have to suffer through single-digit fuel economy figures. But hey, if you've made the petrol choice, you've got one of the better petrol powertrains out there. It's also incredibly refined, and in fact, the only thing you can really hear is the turbocharger whine at certain RPMs. Now we have to talk about the ride quality of the Thar Roxx, because really that's where Mahindra seems to have put the maximum amount of its focus. For one, this car uses an entirely new platform. It's the Gen 4 ladder frame chassis, which Mahindra has dubbed Glide. That too is a pretty big call because yeah, this is still ultimately a ladder frame SUV with a live rear axle. So how has it turned out? Well, very good by the standards of ladder frame SUVs. I will give it that much at least. The new ladder frame chassis is considerably stiffer, which allows them in turn to fit softer dampers. They've also equipped it with the likes of frequency selective damping, as well as rubber bushings for the bump stops, which really adds a nice soft edge to the suspension. The result? Well, yes, it is among some of the better ladder frame SUVs out there. You don't get moved around and shook around like you would expect to in a Thar or any other big body-on-frame SUV, but frankly, it's just no match for a conventional monocoque SUV like the XUV 700. Though considerably softened, you do still feel quite a bit of vibration over a bumpy road like this one, and hit a heavy bump, and yeah, there's a lot of thud through the cabin. What has improved considerably is that you don't get a lot of shake or shudder or shock through the steering wheel, and that's because they've moved from hydraulic to electric power steering. That's a huge benefit, not just from the steering point of view, which I'll get to in a moment, but also from the fact that this car just doesn't feel as cumbersome to drive over a bad road. But yeah, the steering, it's so much lighter, it's so much easier, and it does make this tough SUV feel like steering a car, a hatchback, a sedan, not a behemoth tank, which is what it actually is. Refinement levels overall are just outstanding, whether it be the engine, the suspension, all of it. There's very little wind noise too. The experience you get is really quite pleasant, and yes, very close to your conventional premium family SUV. All this, remember, is in a Thar, which is meant to be a lifestyle off-roader. And though I may be in a small narrow lane right now, I drove this car out on the highway earlier and it handled that even better than this. You see, as the speeds build in this car, the ride quality gets even better, and you're also granted this godlike stability on this big, heavy, tough ladder frame chassis.
Next, it was time to jump into another variant, the diesel automatic with 4x4.
The diesel 4x4 automatic seems like the one you'd choose if you want to do some nice plush off-roading, What I mean by that is the convenience of an automatic with all the toughness of a 4x4 system with low range transfer case and electronic locking rear differential, and a nice healthy reserve of diesel torque to get you unstuck from some sticky situations. But no, right now we're out on the highway and it serves as a pretty good highway cruiser as well. The first thing you gotta note is that it's a whole lot lazier than the turbo petrol engine. Spins up nice and gently, but feels like there's a strong reserve waiting to be unleashed. What also keeps things lazy is the fact that this car doesn't have a sport mode for some reason. It does have the off-road modes, sand, mud and snow, but there's no zoom mode to make things go faster. I'm not sure why that is, but that's how it is, and I suppose it's just as well with the big lazy diesel engine. The gearbox as a result never gets too aggressive and likes to slur through its gears, which is just fine. Another thing I noticed about this diesel automatic version is that the brakes are a whole lot snappier than the petrol automatic version. You have to be a lot more judicious with the brake pedal or else you'll be lurched forward. Another thing I'm happy to report is that the diesel version doesn't feel any different in the ride and handling department compared to the petrol. Oftentimes, in order to compensate for the added weight of a diesel engine, car makers stiffen up the suspension, and the heavier weight also makes the car feel a bit more ponderous, but not here because this is a heavy car either way, and the light electric power steering takes care of it so well. It just doesn't make you feel the weight of this big heavy Thar Roxx.
Now, given this is the 4x4 version of a Mahindra Thar, the right thing to do would be to go off-roading. But again, unfortunately, time was not on our side. But stay subscribed to the Autocar India channel because we're definitely going to put it through a proper 4x4 test soon. What I can do to whet your appetite until then is tell you about the Thar Roxx's off-road hardware. Though we don't have a ground clearance figure, we hear it's higher than the 3-doors 226mm thanks to the larger wheels, and it has the same 650mm of water wading ability. Its ramp breakover angle is reduced to 23.9 degrees thanks to the longer wheelbase, while approach and departure are 41.7 and 36.1 degrees respectively. You get a low-range transfer case activated by a traditional lever, not the on-the-fly knob like the Scorpio N, and there are brake locking differentials as standard with an electronic locking rear differential for the 4x4 versions. There's crawl assist that helps you navigate through tough terrain at low speed, while IntelliTurn Assist brakes the inside wheel for sharper turns at lower speeds. And finally, we managed to squeeze in just enough time to try out the diesel manual 4x4.
Now I suppose this is the purest form of the Thar you can get, especially if you want to go off-roading. It gives you full manual control of everything and really get into the action of getting yourself unstuck. But again, here out on the highway, it's not such a bad experience. It makes for a pretty good cruiser. That's largely down to the diesel engine's lazy, heavy reserves of torque. You can just chuck it into 5th or 6th gear even and just cruise. Like for instance, check this out, 6th gear, 1000 maybe 100 RPM, 58 kph, and it's pulling. It's not pulling enthusiastically, but it's pulling. Now again here, like with the diesel automatic, you don't get a sport mode or zoom mode. But in this manual version, you don't get the off-road modes either. It doesn't appear so at least. And again, that's just as well because, like I said, this is a nice lazy diesel engine. You don't really feel the need for a sport mode. And you don't feel the need for the off-road modes either because this is the manual. You want it to be as pure an experience as possible. You want to have full manual control with little electronic intervention. So what about the actual process of driving manual? Well, not off to a good start honestly because of the way the pedals are arranged. There's not a lot of room in the footwell, and because the pedals are spaced the way they are, there isn't a dead pedal. So you find your feet kind of fumbling around, especially if you're wearing big shoes, and that's not an ideal driving situation. It feels a bit utilitarian in a car that has otherwise grown up so very much. The clutch is nice and light even if it has quite a bit of travel to it. And the gear shift is not too heavy either. It's not super light, don't get me wrong. It's very positive. The throws are a bit long, but they at least do feel satisfying once you slot them in. And it certainly doesn't feel as truck-like as ladder frame SUVs of old.
And with that, though we didn't get a chance to go off-roading, we got a pretty good impression of the Mahindra Thar Roxx. To answer the question from before, no, the tough ladder frame chassis and its inherent characteristics mean it's not quite as comfy as an XUV 700, but it's impressive how close it is on refinement. But just who is the Thar Roxx for, and where does it fit in the lineup? That's a little more confusing. Thus far, the 3-door Thar was the recreational 4x4, the XUV 700 was the premium 7-seater, and if you wanted a bit of both, there was the Scorpio N. The Roxx feels like a similar proposition to the Scorpio, but with the look of a Thar instead. What matters though is that Mahindra has offered buyers yet another option in the same 12 lakh plus SUV space, which it wants to completely dominate in the next few years. Prices go from 12.99 lakh rupees to 20.49 lakh rupees across the wide range of variants. But do note, 4x4 prices haven't been revealed yet, so expect to pay a few more lakhs for those.
Well, one thing's for very sure, this is more than just an elongated Thar. It is so much more than the sum of its parts. That's because it's got a new chassis and so much tech. It's an all-new Mahindra SUV, and in fact, a lot from this car will trickle down into lesser Mahindras, perhaps even the 3-door Thar. It really sets a new benchmark for Mahindra's ladder frame SUVs, and I'm excited to see what the brand has next, both for the Thar and the rest of its SUV lineup.